It is my pleasure to introduce Pierre Belloc, who will be joining us today. He's currently an associate professor in psychology at the University of Montreal, and he's focused on, in amongst many other things, training artificial neural networks to mimic human brain activity and behavior at the level of the individual. So. Today he's going to be talking about playing video games in the scanner and looking at human video gameplay and fMRI brain activity and modeling that with artificial neural networks. So I think you'll enjoy the talk, and Pierre, I'll let you take it from here. Thanks again for joining us.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me. It's a pleasure to present this work today. So as you mentioned, the overall topic of the talk is really video game in the scanner and how we can model this type of data, both from a behavioral perspective and a brain activity perspective. So before I start, to make sure I'm not cutting through this very important part, some acknowledgements. This work is funded by a private donation by the Courtois Foundation. And it also receives support from a variety of institutions. So the project is based at the research center of the Montreal Geriatric Institute, the CRIUGM, and this is affiliated with University of Montreal, Canada, and part actually from a big health institution called the CIUS. But we also have people in the team from various institutions which are listed here. I want to really express my gratefulness to the senior mod team, because this project is very heavy logistically. So it really takes a village to get there. And the subjects, because as you will see, it takes also a lot of dedication from the participants themselves. The scanning team, the people that weekly get those participants in the scanner. And two individuals in particular, Julie Boyle and Basile Pinsard, Julie being the manager of the project and Basile Pinsard being our data engineer. Actually, today I'm going to be presenting work that I haven't done. I'm kind of like doing some advertisement for other people's work. So the first author of the work I'm going to be presenting are Yann Harel, who's finishing his PhD in psychology. Anirudh Kemtour, I see there's an issue in that slide. It's Yann Harel under the second name as well, but it's Anirudh Kemtour who's finished his master studies at the University of Montreal in Mila, which is an AI institute here in Montreal. André Cyr also made some major contribution. I'll mention his work extensively. He's a mechanical engineer and he's in charge of all the hardware development for the project. And finally, again, Basile, who's our data engineer for the entire project, but has been particularly involved in setting up the video game experiments. So just starting for context, there's been a surge of interest in using artificial neural networks to model brain activity. And I would say this interest was born in the domain of vision. So what some pioneer labs started doing, such as James DiCarlo's lab and Dan Yamin's, was to take artificial neural nets that were trained purely to perform vision tasks, such as recognizing a dog and a cat, or a cat in an image, and then try to relate the activity of the layers of these artificial neural nets to the activity of different regions in the brain. So this schematic, which I present here from the Shrimps paper, is representing how you may want to kind of compare those two types of recordings. So essentially what you do is you take a stimulus, here a picture of Marie Curie, which you're going to present both to the brain of a macaque or a human and to an artificial neural net. And then you're going to extract the value of the activity evoked by that stimulus, both in the biological and the artificial neural networks. And then you can try to essentially predict the brain response based on the activity of the artificial neural network. And that approach proved surprisingly successful. And actually, artificial neural nets that were designed purely task, for behavior, appeared as the best model of brain activities that were available when this line of research started. So obviously that created an enormous interest in understanding why and how those artificial neural networks converge to brain-like representations. So there's a recent paper by Kochte and King is extending that idea to try to look at many different artificial neural networks. Here you have 3,000 of them, and see what drives the convergence with brain activity. So the top schematic is a MEG dataset, and the bottom is with functional MRI. What you have on the x-axis is the performance of the model on a self-supervised language task, so predicting the next word from passwords. On the y-axis, you have the quality of the prediction of brain activity, right? So the higher, the more aligned with brain data. And each point, those models vary along multiple axes. They are more or less deep, they are more or less wide. They have more or less units inside of them. And also they have more or less time to train on that task. So you have something like 30 architectures and 100 variants for each architecture. And what can be seen both in fMRI and MEG is essentially the better you are at the task. So when you go to the right and your accuracy in next word prediction increases, the better you are at predicting brain activity. Although maybe you can see that when we reach a very high level of accuracy, it actually tends to go down. So maybe at some point you start to depart from brain activity type representation. But at least in this early phase of scaling up the performance, there's a very clear convergence between models that perform better in language are better at predicting brain responses to language stimuli. So definitely that kind of brings a natural next step, which is, could we simply try to train networks to predict brain activity directly, or maybe brain activity and perform a task, so some kind of a multi-objective types of approach. So there's been a few recent papers trying to do that. I'm not going to try to review them comprehensively, but I just wanted to mention that study by Palazzo and colleague, which came out about a year ago. And essentially what this work did was to use EEG data and try to learn new representation, new latent space representation of the EEG data, take some natural images that were presented to the subject while they collected the EEG, then learn new representation of these natural images with a traditional convolutional neural net, and then use a contrastive loss such that the two sets of latent representation are maximally associated, compared to a null hypothesis where you mix EEG and images which are not actually corresponding. So what they've shown is that if you train a network in that fashion, so basically to mimic brain activity, you would actually get some networks that perform really well on image classification. So they report that with a pure visual training compared to a training with brain data, they can see marginal but significant gains in accuracy. So really, maybe we're on the verge of a new generation of AI system when brain activity is used as an integral part of the training. We may also be on the verge of a new generation of computational neuroscience systems where deep neural nets are used directly to try and mimic brain activity. So really that's the motivation for the NeuroMod project, because in order to train the system, we need a massive amount of data. So in that particular work, they had 2,000 images that they presented to the subjects. So Quote-1 NeuroMod aims at brain augmented learning, so try to train artificial neural nets directly with brain data, possibly as well with annotation of human activity. So the network also tried to mimic what humans do. We also wanted to have some kind of like multimodal learning. So initially, a lot of work has been directed in the vision domain. We've seen a lot of work coming out recently in language, but we really wanted to expand beyond those initial areas of interest. And finally, we wanted to have a community-driven approach to data collection and dissemination. So the data are public, you can have access to them, but we've also engaged extensively with the community to help us design the tasks that we've had the subject perform. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the data set itself. So the data is a very kind of like opinionated type of design. It's a deep phenotype fMRI data set or neuroimaging data set, because we're going to have more than fMRI. So this little graph by the review of Nacellera illustrates very well this concept of deep fMRI. So on the x-axis, what you have is the amount of data collected by subject measured in hours. And on the y-axis, you have the number of subjects in the study. So the UK Biobank, which is currently the largest neuroimaging sample we have available for the community, it's all the way on the top left. What that means is that you have a lot of subjects, 100,000 when the study will be completed, but you have very little data per subject, in the order of like 5 or maybe 10 minutes per subject, something like that. So when you move to the right, you see that typically the number of subjects tends to decrease. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd be on the top right corner. So, you know, you will have 100,000 subjects with hundreds of hours of data, but not going to happen. So in practice, we had this data set by Ross Poldrack, MyConnectome, which really led the way, where Dr. Poldrack scanned himself on a regular basis for a whole year, and so accumulated over 20 hours of fMRI on himself. So that's one of the points on the right. Recently, we've seen the Doctor Who data set, who has like actually, I believe, 40 hours. So maybe that graph is not fully accurate. For one subject watching the TV show Doctor Who, we have the IBC data set, which is here pointed very much to the left, but this is outdated data. So the individual brain charting data set is going to release like 50 hours of fMRI per subject. We've got the natural scenes data set, which has 40 hours of fMRI per subject. I mean, you're starting to see the pattern here. But even NSD has only 10 subjects. IBC is the same. So, you know, low number of subjects, lots of data per subject. So that's really what NeuroMods tries to do, is to build extremely accurate individual brain models. So currently we're kind of breaking the x-axis already. So we have roughly collected 175 hours of fMRI data per subject, which really has required more than 300 hours of scan time, because we have very long setup times, and you'll understand why in a minute. Our original goal was to get to 500 hours of fMRI. I'm not sure we're going to get there, but I think we're going to break probably to 250. And clearly, I had underestimated how long it took to set up subjects. So NeuroMod is already, and kind of by far, the largest individual fMRI data set in existence. And considering it took years of weekly scan to collect, I assume this may stay the largest one for a little while. So we've got 6 participants. They're generally healthy. They needed to be compatible with MRI and MEG to have normal hearing for their age. They need to understand English because all our stimuli are in English. And most importantly, they needed to be willing to be scanned 1.5 to 3 hours a week for at least 5 years. So definitely that was a kind of like more stringent inclusion criteria. We have 3 men, 3 women, they're right-handed. We have 3 francophone, 1 anglophone, and 2 bilingual. That's one of the cool things of doing this study in Montreal. We have a lot of those. They're quite common. So we have a pure bilingual English-French and pure bilingual English and Czech. in terms of our setup, I'm not going to be able to get into all of it. Today, I'm going to focus on the video game component of the project, but we have done a lot of structural and functional MRI. We're planning to do quite a bit of MEG as well, although that component of this project has been stalled for a while, in part because of the shortage of helium the world is experiencing right now, which has shut down our MEC center. We have high quality sound delivery and video delivery. We collect eye tracking systematically, not early in the project, but for the past year and a half, something like that. We also record skin conductance, respiration, electrocardiogram, the optical plethysmograph for cardiac activity. We use custom head case to reduce motion, and I think that's it. Then there's a video game setup, but I'm going to talk about that quite a bit. So when we designed our task, as I explained, I wanted to have like essentially a bunch of different domains covered. So we are covering tasks in the emotion domain, the vision domain, the auditive domain, language domain, memory domain, and the action domain, which includes mostly video game at this stage. And I also wanted to have both very naturalistic tasks and very controlled tasks. So you'll see when I'm going to present you the overview of tasks that, the closer you are from the center, the more naturalistic you are, and the more on the border, the more controlled you are. So I'm not going to have time to explain, most of those data sets. There's just too many of them. But a couple of highlights is that we're going to have the Things data set is almost the same size as NSD. So it's 20 hours of watching images that are very well-controlled categories. So that was designed by Martin Hebert, Max Planck Institute, Germany. We're going to have the Cohen dataset, which are about 1,000 videos with control emotional content based on the Cohen database. We're going to have the triplets dataset, which is presentation of different words and word association. And we've selected those word associations so that it will be controversial. So human and machines disagree. Humans may disagree on some of them. So we've done a very large-scale behavioral validation to select those words prior to putting them in the scanner. So this is led by Dr. Valentina Bocchesani. We have a bunch of movies, like we watched the 6 first seasons of Friends in the scanner, for example. We watched 4 complete movies, 2 of them we repeated. In the maybe last notable thing is that we're going to have the only and largest controlled benchmark for working memory task. So we're probably going to have something like over 10 hours of working memory task in the scanner, probing systematically different types of working memory. And that's designed by Xiao Xuan and Dr. Puyaba Shivan at McGill University. So, my point is lots of naturalistic, lots of controlled, lots of people to help us design all of this. I've put the faces of the Neuromod team here, trying to organize them per category. But it really is a community work, and we're exchanging a lot across those silos. So we actually are not working in silos. So just briefly to say that the data is organized in bits. It's preprocessed with fMRI prep. We are keeping track of the versioning through a data lab tool, which means that you can update your data set after pulling a given release. So we try to do yearly release. So far, we've done one in 2020. We just did one in 2022. Actually, I believe we still have to push the tag, but it will be ready for Christmas. A lot of fMRI data for Christmas. To access it, I wish we could put it on Open Neuro, but we live in Quebec and we try to respect the law, so we can't. We need to have some kind of an insurance that the data are used in a way that's consistent with what the subjects agreed to do, which is broadly to understand artificial and biological intelligence. So you see, we're not too picky, but you still need to be doing research and research on intelligence in a broad sense. So to access to the data, you have to write a very short blurb describing the general aim of your study. And we are not here to say if it's a good or a bad study. We're just here to say if that fits with our very broad mission. And if that's the case, then you have to sign some papers saying you won't do crazy things with the data, and then you're good to go, get access. All right. And yeah, I mean, if you want to apply and get access to the data, the website is cneuromod.ca, CA to Canada. So, video games now. First of all, the setup. So we decided to build our own video game controller because we put a lot of wires in the scanner, right? Like we've got the electrodes for the electrocardiogram and the skin conductance, all of that. So we didn't want to add, and the sensimetrics for audio is also wired and shielded. So we didn't want to add any more wires to that already extremely wired MRI experiment. So we decided to build a full fiber optics controller, and by we, I mean really André Cyr, who's an engineer and loved doing that kind of things. Our first prototype was very exciting, but broke. Then we had a second prototype, which was also very exciting and broke again. And I'm going to fast forward because I believe we're on like version 3 of the button, version 5 of the scales, and it's different component went through different iterations. But we have a model that now robust and works. When we started the project, there was no commercially available solutions of that kind. Hence why we went into that very ambitious technical development. There is now one, there's a company selling it. But the beauty of this one is that we are making it fully open. So it's open hardware. I'm going to share the slides. Through that link, you can have access to all the plans, the 3D plan to build the parts, but also build the electronic components of the system. So we have a detailed guide where you're going to get all the 3D models for the parts, which is shown on top, and a kind of like step-by-step pictures showing you how to print them or to assemble them, and hopefully get a working controller. So far, I mean, we are the only one who have built one. We currently have a collab with the INRIA team of Bertrand Thirion in Paris. They're trying to build one for the IBC project. So we should have our first replica in the near future. But in the meantime, we've been using it for a while, and it's robust and it works well. And when it breaks, it's easy to repair because of its design. So we did a little a formal validation of that setup. So what we did is perform some kind of a button press task in the scanner. That's what's shown on the left, that used our custom-made fiber optics controller. We also replicated that exact same task with a commercially available controller. It's not a particularly good controller, just an off-the-shelf kind of cheap game controller, but it's using electronic parts and pretty good. And we performed the task in a mock scanner. Obviously, we couldn't take the electronic controller in the MRI, but we have a pretty accurate mock scanner next to our actual scanner. We also built a replica of our 64-channel coil. That may have been a little bit overkill, but André loves doing that kind of stuff, so we did it. So, we were in physical situation very close to the real thing. So the task consisted of, we had a visual cue, and then we needed to press a button as fast as possible. And there were two types of stimuli, some which were like short presses and other long presses. So as soon as the visual cue disappears, you have to release the button. So we did that task. We could quantify reaction time and also button press duration as a proxy of the, the quality of the reactivity of the controller. So those are the results. On top, you see the reaction time. In blue is the actual MRI controller. In orange is the mock scan commercial controller. And for all 8 buttons that we have, so we have 4 action buttons on the right and 4 direction buttons organized across on the left. None of those showed difference. So essentially, we press the button, there's a little plastic sheet that cuts a light beam, and we detect that electronically, and that's about as fast as actually recording a button press with a full electronical setup. Now, on the panel in the middle, you can see the release reaction time for long trials. And you will see that for some buttons, we detected some differences. Those differences are very small, 10 to 30 milliseconds, but they are there. And when we looked at the short trial, we observed something similar. So yeah, the bottom line is that we were able to see some significant departure from our controller to a commercial controller. And it seems to be really in the release component of the actions. And it seems to be of the order of 10, 30 milliseconds. And so for most games, that's not a problem. We've actually collected behavioral data in video games, and we were able to show that mostly, you don't use that level of precision. You can anticipate a little bit the release and compensate for it. For games where you would have to smash the button as fast as you can, we could probably not do it with that controller. The other thing we did is measure some like signal to noise ratio maps in phantoms with and without the controller, and we see very marginal changes in those metrics, which is not surprising. I mean, that's plastic and fiber optics. It shouldn't mess with the MRI, but we just checked it didn't. So here we go. That's how we get to play video games in the scanner. Now, the second component is like, well, how do you play games? How do you record action? And quite frankly, if we had to develop that thing, I don't think we would have collected any data by now. But thankfully, a company called OpenAI organized a video game competition at the beginning of the NeuroMod project. I believe that was around 2018, they launched that competition. It was called Retro. And they adapted their very popular GYM interface to old game emulator. So an emulator is a piece of software that tries to mimic a piece of hardware. And computers those days have become like so fast that they can actually pretend they're a Nintendo Entertainment System and go ahead and simulate every little transistor in there. So you can essentially virtually play some very old hardware. So any ROM that worked on that old hardware now just needs to be plugged in and you're ready to go. So there's a lot of emulator aficionados out there, lots of actual platforms that have been developed over the years. So what OpenAI did was simply create a Python interface between their GYM API and an existing emulator. So they're supporting a number of game consoles, including the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive if you lived in Europe. That opens roughly 1,000 different video games, including classic titles such as Mario Bros. Or Shinobi, which I'm going to be presenting in a minute. The beauty of this interface, I'm going to try to keep it short because I get really excited about this library. But basically what you record are button presses, and from those button presses and combined with the ROM of the game, you can reconstruct every frame of the game and you have access to the whole memory. So if you can map out certain components of the memory, you can extract those values at every frame. You can use the API to train artificial neural net. You can use the API for humans to play the game and record their gameplay. And through the access to the entire memory, you can annotate the game in a way that would be very hard to achieve with just the video. You can annotate exactly where the player is, what buttons they pressed, what actions they took, what enemies were there, whether they died, whether else. You get the idea. So what we did, this was our it's almost pilot data I'm presenting today, because I think many things need to be improved in the design and have been improved in the design for subsequent games. But that was our first attempt at doing this. So we selected Shinobi 3 because growing up, I played a lot of Shinobi and I got really frustrated, not being very good. So when I turned 40, I started playing it obsessively to get really, really good. And so that I was in the middle of that when we had to select the game. So I said, let's do Shinobi. I had some slightly more scientific rationale as well, but I won't mention that part. That's a game that was released in '93. what you need to do is read the end of the level, typically going from left to right, but it can get a little bit more complicated than that. You can jump, you can run, you can slash thing, you can throw shurikens at thing, and you have a superpower that destroys everything, but you cannot use this one too often. So we selected, okay, so in that initial experiment, we didn't have the video game controller initially. So what we did is that we set up the OpenAI Gym Retro library, turned it into like a little video game console on a very small computer, and gave that to the subject so they could play at home. So that's the schematic on the right. You'll notice the cat. The cat indicates that this was not a very controlled environment. And really, we didn't even enforce a particular playing regimen. So you will see that some subject played, for over a year, others over some months. Some people went on like a video game playing binge for a weekend, let's say. So sometimes we have 10 hours of behavioral data that weekend. And sometimes we go by and we don't have any. But every subject became really good at the game before we even started the imaging component of the game. Then in the scanner, I mean, we've got our custom built controller, we've got the video projector, people have the sound, they have to have the music of the game. And yeah, that's more or less it. So for this initial experiment, we wanted to see if we could capture good signal in fMRI related to actions in the game. So what we did is that we selected only 3 levels and got them to be played for about 10 hours per subject. So we had a lot and a lot and a lot of repetition in the scanner, as well as outside of the scanner. So when I say 10 hours, it's really with fMRI data, because if we include the behavioral data outside of the scanner, that's a lot more than that. I said the 3 levels that mostly the same game mechanics. Shinobi 3 was a pretty terrible choice in retrospect. So every level is almost like a mini game. Some of them are really weird. You're like on a horse, or actually at some point you're surfing. So it's strange. But those 3 levels, you kind of like have to run, kill things, and manage to escape through an opening that's mostly on the right. So we selected those 3 levels that were kind of consistent. Now, one initial concern we had was like, okay, how much motion are we going to get with people, playing? So we have this little support system on people's tummy, and I sure say that it's you're not moving your shoulders much. It's really like your hands and your fingers in particular that move. So those are measures of frame displacement. So average frame displacement, integrating both translation and rotation. So that's the measure used by the original Power 2012 paper. And those are the 4 subjects that entered that initial experiment. So we didn't have the 6th subject for this one. And as you can see, Sub 04 in particular, for most runs, has a frame displacement that's below 0.15. So those are really good low motion level. And actually, we have a bunch of runs with below 0.1 FD. So those are really excellent, very minimal motion level. Sub 01 also achieved mostly below 0.15 and always below 0.2. So those are also fairly like low motion runs. Sub 02 has more, moderate motion, and Sub 06 has large motion. So that's something we saw across all data sets. This is very consistent. So it's interesting because we have kind of like a nice little cocktail of like high quality data, moderate, and low as far as motion is concerned. But at least it's not evident that, you can collect fairly low motion data even playing the video game. In terms of the behavior, that's on the left, it's outside of the scanner. So on the x-axis, you have the day of training. That's for Sub 01, which is who's the subject who played the most. So you see, you have about a year of exercise here. And the first graph shows you the max score achieved by that participant on the first level of the game. And the second graph shows you the percentage of attempts where the subject manages to finish the level. And as you can see, it took something like, I don't know, 6 months for the subject to essentially finish the level every time. Actually, this is kind of like the drop at the end. That's maybe boredom. So maybe there's some suicide going on there. I don't know. The score also took about 3 months before reaching this sort of plateau. And actually, I mean, achieving that score is pretty challenging. You need to secure a number of very difficult bonuses to get there. So clearly that subject is very familiar with the game by the time we start the neuroimaging experiment. On the right, what you have is a comparison of the max score and the percentage of completion inside and outside of the scanner. And I mean, as you can see in the scan, which is a dark blue line, it's mostly actually above the light blue line. And my interpretation of that is that in the scanner, it's very controlled and people concentrate really well. While at home, you know, the cat picture. So, you know, maybe it's just an attentional thing. Maybe that subject also got even better at Shinobi. Who knows? Humans are like that. They can get better even after years of practice. So the first thing we did was like traditional SPM maps. So that's an example of a design matrix. This is with a very minimal number of annotations, actually. On Mario, we can generate roughly 300 annotations at the moment. But that was like kind of initial proof of concept. So here you have things like, you know, pressing one of the 8 buttons. You have motion parameters, but you have things like hitting an enemy, jumping, or killing an enemy, which are much more infrequent events. And those are the type of maps you can generate, and you know, with some correction for multiple comparisons. Those activation maps are associated with a particular contrast, which I forgot to indicate, which is a mistake. I'm not going to guess, but it's either hit, jump, or kill. The first one is a map generated by combining data of an entire session, so roughly 1 hour of data. The bottom one is for the same contrast and the same subject, but different session. And then we can combine data from, you know, all the 10 hours and generate very reliable subject level maps. And we see that there's pretty stark differences across subject in terms of the regions that are being engaged. So you've got sub 1 here and sub 4 there, although the particular slides don't correspond. So don't just like compare one to the other. Just take my word that there are differences in the regions involved. So we try to quantify just a little bit the reproducibility. So those are for maps generated from a single run. So a run is roughly 10 minutes of gameplay mixed over 3 levels. And in green, you have the type of value when you do a spatial correlation between maps generated for the same subjects. And in orange, you have a spatial correlation for maps generated from different subjects. And as you can see, the correlation are, you know, low to moderate, with, you know, sometimes some value in the 0.4, 0.5 range. But it's clearly much higher when you look within subject than between subject, which was strongly expected. As I said, those are for single runs. Those are fairly noisy maps. So another observation is that some events get much more reliable subject-specific maps than others. So the hit being much better than the kill contrast. But bear in mind that hits happen many, many times for every game, while kill are fairly unusual event. That still happen at every game, but not all the time. So that was a proof of concept that with this type of very naturalistic task, you can annotate the behavior of subjects, and you can relate this behavior to brain activity, kind of like what you would do with a more controlled paradigm, except that this one is, let's say, you know, much more complex and engaging than most controlled paradigm, at least the one we used in Neuromod for sure. So the next step was to see, can we use now this type of data and try to do the brain augmented learning tasks that I had mentioned before. So before we actually, I'm not going to show full brain augmented learning where we try to directly feed brain activity. But before we went there, what we wanted to do was just to build a model of video gameplay behaviorally and see if those models could be related to brain activity through a brain encoding approach, very similar to the work of Kochte and King that I opened with. So step one, we take video frames generated during gameplay by the player, a particular player. And we are going to try to predict what the player will do in that particular situation based on pixel level data. So that's called imitation learning or behavioral cloning in the AI literature. And if we manage to do that, then we can try to take the latent space of this artificial net, this little imitation, behavioral imitation network, and see if those latent activity are predictive of brain activity. So that's going to be step 3. So let's get to it. The network architecture is a very vanilla recurrent architecture. So we start by some convolutional layers that learn little like filter that are being applied to all the locations in the images. So you have a number of filters being learned. You stack layers with nonlinearity between them. So this is done for each image separately. And then you're going to learn a recurrent neural net that sort of has a temporal latent space. And here we used a so-called LSTM architecture, which stands for long short-term memory. And was, when we started this project, the sort of like standard to model time series. Since then, everybody is using transformer, and LSTM are almost a thing of the past, but it takes us a few years to complete a project. So unfortunately, we're lagging the AI community all the time. At the very end of the network, you have some fully connected layer and essentially a softmax transform that's going to tell like what button to press. So really, this is a very basic supervised learning task where the input, the X, is a series of images generated through the video of recorded when the player played the game. And the Y, what you're trying to predict, are button presses. So as you will see, the different players have very different play style. That was my real scientific motivation to select that game. By watching other players play in the arcade for years, I had noticed that Shinobi is a hard game, and people tend to develop their own kind of like identity playing it. So I wanted to be able to discriminate behaviorally the subjects a lot. So that's why I went for that particular game. I was pretty confident we would get subject specificity in the behavior. On the left is actually a player that's not trained. It's a researcher in the team who just recorded gameplay, very basic gameplay. So you can see the ninja, it walks to the right, and it throws shurikens and kills things. I mean, basically, there's nothing wrong with this. That's the purpose of the game, and even as a novice player, the strategy is remarkably efficient. At least, hasn't been hit once at this stage. So now on the right, I'm going to show you some gameplay from another player, that part of our cohort, and after hours and hours of practice. And so first of all, that player actually runs and use very quick flying kicks to kill things. Sword slash here, more flying kick, actually made a mistake and lost a bit of life. So you can see that it's, I don't know, it's all a matter of taste, but you may want to argue this is more stylish, and it's a hell lot faster, that's for sure. So definitely those two players use the game very differently, and it won't take lots of data to actually discriminate who's playing just by looking at frequency of button presses. So now what you have here is a result of a behavioral imitation. So on the left, what you have is a Let me just check from the title of the video. So that's an imitation network for the first play style I showed you. And I mean, there are some elements which we hadn't seen before, like crouching a lot. But you know, that network learns from a fairly large data set. So maybe we just didn't look at an example where the human was doing that. But you know, this is a very slow and very defensive strategy. So it kind of aligns. And on the right, what you have is imitation of that other player. And as you can see, the network has learned to run, learned to fly kick at the right moment, and using some shuriken, messing up really badly here. But you know, once again, maybe the human does it sometimes. We just haven't seen those samples. So here, I mean, I'm commenting qualitatively. Obviously, we also have quantitative metrics. We see, you know, whether we are actually able to predict button presses, which with proper cross-validation is about 70% of the time. So, you know, both qualitatively and quantitatively, we're able to imitate individual play style. So finally, we use that individually trained network to see if we could encode brain activity. So what you have at the top is an R-square map. So even an R-square of 0.2 is actually a pretty good value. And you can see that we can explain quite a bit of brain activity in the visual cortex, the sensory motor cortex, but also in associative frontoparietal regions. And if we use a network from another subject, so that the behavior doesn't match the particular individual we're trying to encode brain data, we also can encode brain data quite well, but not as well. And here in green, you have significant differences in the embedding quality. The third row is actually a model starting directly from pixel level information, visual information. And when you do a difference between the individually specific model, you see that there's a big loss in the quality of brain embedding. So essentially what we took from that is that we can imitate human behavior with artificial neural nets in complex environment. And the latent representations that are being learned seem to be essentially good annotations of behavior that are predictive of brain activity. So that's essentially where we are in the modeling of this type of data at the moment. So that's I think we came to work. I just commented on subject 1 here, but we had actually very consistent results over the 4 subjects. And you know, those are essentially 4 n=1 study. We do our statistics at the individual level. So if you want to think about it that way, we've replicated our result 4 times. Just because I see I'm running a little bit out of time, I just wanted to mention what the project is currently working on and the data we're going to release next year. That may be of interest if you want to jump in and start working on video game. We finished collecting Mario, and in Mario we have 24 levels this time. So we have also collected data while people were training. So you have the whole training phase for the subjects. The way that Mario is designed, it's great to be able to test generalization of agent across multiple environments, because there's a lot of common design elements between different maps. So that data set is not only collected but pre-processed, and we are running our test right now on the data, so we make it public. We've also almost done with the acquisition of Mario Stars. So Mario Stars is a 16-bit remake of Mario. So the maps of the levels are almost identical. There's a few minor differences. The gameplay is almost identical. There's a few minor differences, but all the sprites, all the images of the game have been redone. So it's an example where you can compare, generalization, where you can separate the control aspect of the game is identical, but the visual aspect of the game needs to be relearned. Finally, we are currently collecting Mario 3, and this one has actually 80 levels. We are planning on collecting roughly 10 hours, and that's ongoing. So those are a little snapshot of the 80 different levels. And Mario 3 is a very creative game. There's like every level brings in like new mechanics, new enemies, new blocks. So it's really an exploration game just as much as an action game. So we think this is a great actually setup to try to do continual learning, where you train an agent to constantly learn from its mistakes and maybe imitate the way humans discover the environment. So we are collecting data while subjects are practicing, and early on there's a lot of early deaths, but people get better quite fast. So it's going to be very interesting to see how agents can mimic this type of behavior. Just wanted to mention real quick that we are, since Mario, collecting eye tracking data. So in red here, like you have the gaze. And I believe we're able to collect really good quality eye tracking data. The blue dot is actually the raw signal from the eye tracker, and there's quite a lot of drift, but we've developed a number of strategies to be able to correct drift systematically, and we think get good quality eye tracking consistently for every session. I also wanted to mention, but I'm running out of time, that we also have built a little interface to control a bot. The bot's named Cosmo. So here you have its video feed, and the player is in the scanner with the MRI compatible controller. And here you have the bot that's being piloted from the scanner. So we are also planning to have control tasks from real visual feeds, rather than have them from video game visual feeds. So that part is still being designed, and we're hoping to release that data set not next year, but the year after, 2024. So just quickly, in conclusion, SyneuroMod has a whole spectrum of tasks in many domains. I've just talked about the video game today. It's individual data to scale, where you can try to train artificial neural nets directly with the imaging data and the behavioral data that's collected alongside of it. We think that thanks to the variety of domains we're probing, we're going to be able to train a multimodal network, and maybe you'll be able to train multimodal network because those are public data. So if you want to embark in the adventure, you're more than welcome. And so we're really hoping that this is going to be a good resource for the neuro AI community and advance a new wave of modeling that encompass not just brain oscillation, but also behavior. So thanks a lot for welcoming me in this space, and I will wait for your questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Pierre. It's a really amazing data set that you've put together. So folks, please submit your questions in the chat. If you'd like to be unmuted to ask yourself, just let us know. So we'll let some questions come in. I guess I wanted to ask one question, which is I'm excited to see more of the modeling come out of this, the neuroimage results. For the results you did show, you reported, I think, R-squared maps.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, how did you get to those? Was that based on a linear model, or did you use some sort of a saliency map from the neural networks, or how did you generate those R-squared values?
Okay, so the short version of it is that we extract the activity of some of the last layers. Those are at a very high time sampling. So we do some dimension reduction a little bit, and then we train a ridge regression from those predictor to brain data. And we apply cross-validation to show, on unseen data, whether you can predict brain activity from the latent space of the artificial network. And
I see. Okay.
the measure of the quality of the prediction is the R-square. And, sometimes people report the noise ceiling, and they define that by, if you were to look at the average activity of many subjects, how well you could predict the activity of another individual. I'm not a fan of this metric because this is really like a between subject noise ceiling. And also, I don't believe that intertrial variability is necessarily a noise. And we're in a situation with the type of model we build to try and capture intertrial variability because it's a recurrent net. So Yeah, I'm not reporting noise ceiling estimates here. This is like a raw R square. And my guess is like with the kind of noise we have in our data, it would be hard to break 0.5. But as I don't know how to measure a noise ceiling for single trial responses. So
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Have you looked at all at the functional connectivity in these data? Different question. Yeah.
with the video game data, no.
Okay.
We are finalizing our first sort of data paper on the resource.
Mhm.
And in there, we've built some functional connectivity estimate and looked at the reliability. We were able to replicate the type of results that Gordon and colleagues, as well as Graton and colleague, reported on the midnight brain scan sample. So that with essentially 30 minutes of data, you can really converge on a static connectome. But yeah, I think from a functional connectivity perspective, we have good quality data. But we haven't tried to look at functional connectivity across all the states.
Got it. Okay. There's a question from Cody which says, can you reverse the experiment and use the fMRI data as input to train the agent to play the game?
So I can understand this question two ways, so I'll try to give the two answers. So could you use the fMRI data as input and if you train the agent to play the game, like essentially predict what people would press a button? So I understand that's a brain decoding question. So could you, from brain activity, decode the specific like button presses? I don't think so. We haven't tried to do it. The issue being that button presses are fairly fast and fMRI is really slow, and button presses often come in burst. So when you look at the regressor from the annotation, like clearly you have those like little spikes of button presses, and I'm not sure we'd be able to really decipher them. Never say never, because the truth is like the behavior of the subjects is quite stereotypical. Like people have practiced a lot. So, you could make some very reasonable guess. I mean, that's what our network does, right? Like it looks only at an image and is able to say pretty well what people will do. So maybe if you also use brain data, you could improve further on that prediction. But you would need to start from a generative model of behavior, such as the one we used. So now, if I understand the question another way, is like, could you train the model directly to predict brain data? We have done this, but I haven't shown some result. And the answer is yes. And at this stage, I don't know if it's beneficial in terms of trying to imitate behavior and how it helps with generalizing to different games. But that's definitely the type of question we're about to work on.
Thanks. Any other questions? We're right at 2, so I think we have maybe somebody wants to ask a quick question. We certainly can.
Yes,
But
excuse me. So I'm going to unmute Cody because I think they want to follow up. There's a follow-up question.
Yeah, sounds good.
I appreciate that. I didn't realize the variation there in the, I guess, the sampling rate, fMRI versus button presses. But then I did have a separate question. Follow on was like one of the subjects that you showed was really good at the game. So did he actually use his brain less? Was there like noticeably less brain activity as skill increased? And does that mess with your results?
Yes. So Sabo 1, which was indeed very passionate about this game somehow, and reached quite high scores, is the one with the worst encoding results, paradoxically. Or maybe not paradoxically, because maybe it's just those are very efficient, very automated representations that pick up less signal in fMRI. Just a hypothesis, but that was yours. That's exactly what we observed.
Okay, so sorry, one more. It's so the fMRI would be more useful to use alongside people learning a skill.
That definitely where we're going with that. So Mario is a learning task. You know, so we separated. I mean, I'm not going to get into the detail of the design, but we have a first phase that's really like a discovery phase, and we do the same for Mario 3. So we are as interested in this like learning phase now as a sort of asymptotic, mostly automated phase that we capture with Shinobi. And I see another question by Martin. I mean, I don't know if Cody, you wanted to follow up.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to you. So Martin asks, did the subject hear the sounds that accompanied the original 90s games, the music? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we're actually hoping to study this as a sound experiment, just as an action and vision experiment. So Mario in particular has very iconic musics. They're like what people call earworms. Do, 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 do. You know, it's just, you can keep it going in your head with a few notes, at least if you played it recently. So I think this is a very interesting aspect actually of those stimuli.
Okay, great. Wonder if the sound off on affects performance.
So we're working on a new data set called Mute Mario, in which we will introduce periods of silence. So we will have answers for
there.
you at some point.
So Pierre, as you know, I think already there's a Slack channel we'll have for this talk where we can have ongoing discussions. And the recording will be pasted in there as well, a link to it. And I think we can go ahead and close the session today unless anyone else has questions. Oh, here's one more. If playing with friends or in isolation. Ooh, can you do?
All right. So we're about to get like a new Prisma scanner, not too far. So we're actually thinking about doing something like Street Fighter at some point. But this is more of not a joke, but we're not committed to this. Neuromod is like a weird project where we decide on the stimuli kind of as we go, about 6 months ahead. So I cannot tell you if we scan this or not, but we would be able to do it. And also for the, we haven't confirmation yet, but we've applied to get some OPM mech systems, those new like portable mech systems. And we would have several of them. So Guillaume Dumas is leading that, and he's really a fan of hyperscanning. So if we get those devices, we'll definitely have different people playing either with each other or against each other. And I believe those type of data would be really interesting. I agree with Shenika.
For the MEG that you have, I guess it's shut down currently too.
Yeah.
So you're trying to bypass the helium by going to OPMs. So you have just one MEG, right?
We've got we have two MEG in Montreal, one at McGill, one at UDM, but we're a UDM based project. We're trying to work with UDM, and anyway, both are closed at the moment. And it's been a lot of
much better setup. Yeah,
it's very technically challenging, the MEG. Also, my team has the MRI team, so we work with TRM GRB for the MEG, but we are only finishing the piloting phase when the Ukraine war hit. So, first COVID and the Ukraine war.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think OPM is the way to go. That would be nice, actually. Really nice experiment. So, yeah. Well, great. Well, this is really excellent work and just amazing and nice that it's fully open. So I guess folks can start. Can they download data now? It's open.
So they need to do this little application. This takes generally a few weeks because there's administrators involved, so this never goes super fast, but it requires minimal work. And after, yes, it's DataLad. The metadata is public, and as soon as you have a key, you can DataLad get, and you're good to go.
Perfect. Okay, good. So hopefully there'll be a lot more results coming out soon. So great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on a Friday, and have a great weekend ahead, and we'll definitely stay in touch going forward. Armin, did you have any other
That's it. Thank you.
comments? Okay,
Happy
great.
holiday, everyone.
All right. Happy holidays, everyone. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.